Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone podcast, episode number 799 for the 28th of January 2024. Richard Saunders coming to you from a children's birthday party in a park in Berkeley, California. It's such a happy scene here with lots of little kids running around. Oh dear, a disaster over there for some reason. There are swings, things to climb on, seesaws. Looks like it's going to be a great day. Coming up on this week's episode of the Skeptic Zone podcast, the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune when it comes to being a skeptic and being attacked by various believers. We cover stories concerning Susan Gerbic, Ben Radford, and Brian Dunning. We're going to kick off with Ben Radford, an interview. He's recently written an article, a very good article, about Bigfoot. Did Ben Radford really kill Bigfoot? Is he to blame? Are the skeptics to blame for the fact that Bigfoot has still yet to be revealed or discovered? Now, this is a bit of a theme in this week's show because we'll also be speaking to Susan Gerbic, who's been the subject of an attack, together with guerrilla skepticism on Wikipedia, from various people who think that she is, well, we all knew it, the personification of evil. Or she's a government shill, or fill in the gap. What has been happening to Susan? Who's been attacking her and why? Find out when we have a chat to Susan Gerbic a bit later on in the show. Also, we cover a very, shall we say, interesting email, or comment, I should say, received by Brian Dunning regarding his movie, the UFO movie They Don't Want You to See, which has put many UFO believers in a bad mood, probably, really. They consider that Brian is one of the agents of disinformation, together with people like Mick West, of course. And then to round off the show, we have the Trove segment, looking part 2, looking at alternative medicine in various newspaper clippings from Australia over the years. Now, a note to those people who listened to last week's episode only to have the Easter egg, the dice game, cut off halfway through. My fault, technical error. I didn't catch that when some early episodes went out. If you go to skepticzone.tv, you can hear the whole episode right off the webpage, including the complete Easter egg. Or you might want to download the podcast again on your download utility app, whatever you're using. If you're somebody who listens on YouTube, you might have to go to skepticzone.tv and listen to the show that way. Not much I can do about that. But now it's time for me to run around the corner, see if there's a nice slice of birthday cake for me. The theme of the party, by the way, is Bluey. Bluey the Australian cartoon. Anyway, while I do all that, I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone. Bigfoot is dead. Was it ever really alive? Bigfoot! Big feets? Bigfoots? I wonder what the correct plural is. Bigfoot is one of those classics of skepticism, like the Yowie in Australia or the Yeti in the Himalayas, also known as the abominable snowman. And other interesting related creatures, the skunk ape is another good example. Who can we turn to find out more? And who can we turn to pronounce the final benediction on Bigfoot, big feet? Is Bigfoot dead? We should ask the man who knows, all the way from beautiful Albuquerque, New Mexico. It's Ben Radford. Hello, Ben.
Hello, Rich. Great to talk to you.
So, Ben, tell me, is it Bigfoot or Big Feets or Big Foots? And what other questions are there around this mysterious cryptid?
You've touched on one of the venerable. So there's a handful of discussions in the world of Bigfootery. One of them is the old catch or kill question, right? Which is, if you were able to kill a Bigfoot, and in doing so, you would prove that it exists, but of course you would end up killing the animal. Is that ethical? I've always that's always struck me as one of those, angels dancing on the head of a pin situations.
Now, Ben, you've written an extensive report in the recent issue of the Skeptical Inquirer, and the name of the report is Bigfoot Dead? Is Bigfoot dead? And you cover so many topics in this report. What I particularly like, you have a timeline of Bigfoot's demise in the 21st century, year after year, notable occurrences and notable people to do with Bigfoot.
Thank you. I appreciate your kind words there. In the article, I talk about an article that I'd actually written 20 years ago. And saying that makes me feel very old. 20 years ago, back when I was a whippersnapper, I wrote an article on Bigfoot. Again, 2 decades ago in Skeptical Inquirer magazine, I did a cover article on sort of wanting to do a broader look at Bigfoot. There have been specific articles on specific aspects, like one particular hoax or Bigfoot fingerprints or a particular video, but we hadn't really sort of taken a forest for the trees approach, if you will. With the addition of the new editor, Stephen Hupp, who of course replaced Stuart Weiss as interim editor, and before that was our late great beloved editor Ken Frazier. Steve contacted me and said, "Hey, I'd like to do a piece on Bigfoot." Well, I'm your guy. And he said, it seems like there hasn't been much going on in Bigfootery in the last few years. And of course, I'm thinking, well, there hasn't been much going on in the past few decades. And so really, I have to credit him for goosing me, if you will, into writing it. And I'm glad he did. It was I'm proud of the piece. I think it gives sort of what I think is sort of a layperson skeptics overview on Bigfoot, and particularly in the last 24 years.
It does make for fascinating reading. You cover the famous 1967 Roger Patterson and Bob Grimland film. Many people will be familiar with that.
Sure.
And we have the case of the well-known Bigfoot hoaxer, Ray Wallace, who your writing here is acknowledged to have made countless hoax tracks using various carved wooden feet. Just perusing your article once again, you make the point, there's a paragraph here saying, and I don't want to give too much away, I'd like people to read it for themselves by subscribing to the Skeptical Inquirer. Ultimately, the biggest problem with the argument for the existence of Bigfoot is that no bones or bodies have been discovered. Believers offer an array of special pleading arguments, which is quite true. And one of the other points that you make here is one of the arguments put forward by the believers is, well, science is discovering new animals, insects, creatures in the sea and on the land every year. Every year there are numerous new species identified. So if that's the case, therefore, whatever cryptid they're interested in, be it the Loch Ness Monster or the Bigfoot, well, there you go. It's just waiting to be discovered.
That's sort of one of the classic rejoinders. The believers like, well, Mr. Skeptic, the last 4 or 5, 10 years they found X, Y, and Z, and the thing is like, okay, let's look at X, Y, and Z. And as it turns out, the vast majority of the animals they're finding are they're not new animals. They are not previously unknown animals, things that had never been seen before. They are they're in some cases a subspecies of known animals. They're animals that were known to exist, but for example, their range wasn't as far as previously thought, and things like that. So, so it's a bit of a red herring, if you will, a Bigfoot red herring, to sort of point to like, oh, well, things are being found. Well, of course they are. But let's be very clear about this. What we're talking about, the subject is not some stick insect the size of your thumb in the middle of Namibia or in the middle of the Congo. What we're talking about are 8, 10, 12 foot tall bipedal hairy creatures supposedly roaming North America. This is very different.
Another fascinating thing you look at here, although it's a slightly different kettle of fish, speaking of monsters and animals, is the various reality TV shows that have been produced, well, in recent years on the hunt for Bigfoot. One in particular caught my eye in 2014, 10 years ago, a show entitled $10 Million Bigfoot Bounty. And you write here, a reality TV show premieres on the Spike Network. 9 teams sought scientific proof of Bigfoot with a $10 million reward. Hosted by Dean Cain, who played Superman on TV some years ago.
Well, I brought up the herrings, you brought up the kettle of fish, so we're good.
Well, I'm sure it was in its way an entertaining show.
Well, that's part of course, the whole genre of reality TV shows. I mean, there's, for example, Finding Bigfoot is an obvious example. There's the Ghost Hunters TV show, which spent, I think, 10 or 12 seasons not finding ghosts. The Oak Island Mystery, another example. I don't watch it. I come across it now and then, but there's, we're still digging in Oak Island. Still? How's that going, guys?
Now, Ben, year after year after year, after decade, there's the promise any day now the Bigfoot will appear. We're just about to find it. It's everywhere. We know it is. We have the evidence, but we're not presenting it yet, but we will soon.
Yeah.
Never happens. And also, you make the point in your article that believers are blaming the skeptics for the Bigfoot not being accepted, or somehow we're suppressing knowledge of the Bigfoot. It's almost a case of shooting the messenger.
Yeah, and I'm glad you touched on that, because that was something that was something new that I wanted to bring to it. Was, again, 20 years ago, I did a sort of overview of some of the Bigfoot evidence, and I repeated a little bit of that original piece in the new one, but I wanted to expand on it. And that's one thing that sort of was new to me, and I hadn't really dug into before. Was, as you mentioned in the last part of my article, I talk about how who are they blaming for not finding Bigfoot? Me. You, skeptics like the late great Michael Dennett and Matt Crowley and others, and so it's just the analogy that I use is how conspiracy theorists, when you ask them for evidence of their claims, they say, "Well, I can't show you because, of course, it's being hidden." Oh, so rather than acknowledge, so you're blaming other people. It's like, I can't give you the evidence because, of course, it's hidden. Well, okay, so, and that was one of the things that I'd seen for many years was basically the blaming of skeptics for why there isn't better evidence of Bigfoot. And oftentimes there would be what they call the ridicule curtain. And I'd seen, for example, prominent cryptozoologists such as Lauren Coleman and other people basically saying that, well, the reason that more people don't come forward with eyewitness accounts is that they're being mocked and ridiculed and hounded by skeptics. And I've always felt that's a somewhat disingenuous argument. It's true that, yes, if you go into work and you say, I saw a Bigfoot, someone might look at you a bit odd. But there's no sustained effort on my part or any skeptics that I know to go out of their way to mock or ridicule eyewitnesses of any type. So it's sort of a straw man argument.
Well, Ben, there's so much to read in this report from the man who knows Bigfoot. You know Bigfoot very well, I think.
Right.
I found the timeline interesting. I found the individual cases over the years of various hoaxes and incidents regarding the search for Bigfoot.
Yeah, and in fact, I in the article I quote one of the most prominent Bigfoot believers, Matt Moneymaker of the BFRO, the Bigfoot Field Research Organization, and I had come across a post that he had put out a couple months ago. And it was this very odd statement it was sort of a somewhat rambling statement. And I zeroed in on part of it. And really, I wish I had another couple pages for the article because it would have been longer and more detailed. But out of respect for the number of pages that we can print and readers' patience, I cut it down. But it was just remarkable. I mean, he was literally accusing Psychop, the Center for Inquiry and Skeptical Inquiry magazine, of trying to actively suppress research into Bigfoot. And it was just the strangest thing. And so as I talked about in the article, I called Barry Carr and said, Barry, what is he talking about? And Barry's like, I don't know. And I dug into it. And I talked to the guy and I said, you make this statement and, he put out this press release, literally accusing us in public of trying to keep people from believing in Bigfoot or something ridiculous like that. I said, where did this come from? And he gave me the source, and I contacted the source. He said, well, that's not really true. So the whole thing fell apart, but it's a good example of how, with a little bit of diligent research, you can find how false these things are.
And I also was listening to Squaring the Strange, your wonderful podcast you co-host with the incomparable Celestia Ward and the fantastic Pascal Romero. And you talk about the Bigfoot at length. So, folks, I would encourage you to listen to Squaring the Strange to find out more. Bigfoot, Bigfoots, Big Feet. Ben Radford, you are just the right man for the job.
That's very kind of you to say. I'm glad that it caught your eye, and I think it's a solid piece. I'll be curious to see what the reaction is from the Bigfoot believers. I've already gotten some minor reaction. Most of it's sort of hand waving and pointing out what they consider to be some minor factual dispute. I'm like, all right, whatever.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Hi, I'm Ben Radford, co-host of Squaring the Strange podcast. In these trying times, as we help each other out to hold on to hope, we want you to know that we're here for you.
Hey, what are you going on about?
Who's interrupting my heartfelt promotional copy?
It's me, Celestia Ward, your co-host. Really? In these trying times? That's the best you can do?
Well, I'm just doing what everyone else is doing. I thought...
That's not what we do.
Oh, for crying out loud, who else is here?
Pascual Romero, your other co-host?
Hey.
We don't do what everybody else does, Ben. That's kind of our thing at Squaring the Strange.
Yeah, we try to approach things a little differently than your standard skeptical talk show.
We do our own thing, bringing science, critical thinking, and skepticism to bear on issues of the day. We've got a professional skeptical author, Ben, who has decades of experience researching topics for a dozen books and thousands of articles.
And a cartoonist skeptic, Celestia, who knows her stuff when it comes to facial weirdness and the psychology of perception.
And a badass heavy metal rock star and tech engineer, Pascual, who brings knowledge of all things audio, plus a bunch of neck tattoos.
Squaring the Strange explores topics both mysterious and mundane through a critical lens. Monsters, panics, media literacy.
Okay, forget the whole trying times promo idea. But we have chupacabras and clown panics, right?
Yes,
Ben.
I think we need to think. Here's Susan Gerbic.
Well, folks, earlier in the show with the interview with Ben Radford, you heard about how people are attacking the skeptics. The Bigfoot believers are attacking skeptics because, well, Bigfoot's not coming forward and they think Bigfoot's real. Why isn't Bigfoot coming forward? It must be the skeptics. And this is also happening in other areas. In fact, on the line from beautiful Salinas, California, we have Susan Gerbic. Hello, Susan.
Hi, Richard. It is beautiful here today.
I know, Salinas. It's a very wonderful part of the world. And thank you very much. Recently, when you were in Australia, you did a 3-part interview with Maynard right in the Skeptic Zone studios, and that was fascinating.
Yes, I really enjoyed it. And we could have gone 5, 6, 7 episodes. No problem.
Yeah, and not many people get to be interviewed in the Skeptic Zone studios. That's for sure.
With the Skeptic Zone cats.
With the Skeptic Zone cats. I think we had to shoo them out at the time. Anyway, Susan, the reason I've called you up is because it's come to my attention just lately that very unhappy people, very, what shall we say, miffed people have not resorted to simply coming up with the evidence for what they happen to believe, but they've decided to attack guerrilla skepticism on Wikipedia. And you in particular, this came out of the blue as far as I know. Was this some sort of a shock or surprise to you?
Well, yes and no. It seems that they're starting to get quite desperate, depending on which attack you're talking about, because they came from two completely different areas this week, had nothing to do with each other, but were quite upset at myself.
Well, let's talk about the first one that was brought to my attention. I think this was the UFO believers apparently had a 3-hour rant on YouTube or something like that.
3 hours started it. Okay, so let's see if I can sum this up. So Wikipedia has rules, and some of the rules are quite strict when it comes to topics that are fringe. Fringe would be anything paranormal. Also, when you're dealing with a human being who's living, then it's called a biography of living people, BLP. Yeah. It's got rules. You have to be very careful about what you can put on a Wikipedia page of a living person. But what happened is the Australian skeptics gave this award, the Ben Spoon Award, to this reporter.
To Russ Coulthard, yes.
So while I was in Sydney, Australia, right after you guys gave the award, I'm sitting at the hotel, and I made an edit to that person's Wikipedia page and put the Ben Spoon Award on there because it's a valid award. It's you guys I had a great citation. You guys are a notable organization, the Australian Skeptics. So there's no reason why that award cannot go on that person's page. And I've done this many times, and my editors have done it many, many, many times. We call it backwards editing, when you have a citation and you look to figure out where to put it. And there's nothing wrong with that. So I did that in December. And then right after, I guess somebody made a Wikipedia user account, I think, just made it for the day, and went and added a whole bunch of flattery to that same person's page. And we're saying things like, he's a well-known reporter, and he's this, and he's an investigative journalist, and that he's, it was very flattering, and they put citations that weren't citations, or they lacked citations. So in other words, a fan of his. So one of the editors of Wikipedia, who's a senior editor, who's been editing far longer than I have, came in and cleaned it all out and just said, no, all this has got to go because this is not cited. These are words of flattery. We don't.
It's, as you keep saying, it's not the rules. You play by the rules with Wikipedia.
Right, of course. So anyway, so he cleaned that out. And I guess that person, Coulthard, is that his name? He went in and he made a announcement on Twitter or X and saying that somebody has just edited his Wikipedia page. So I don't know if he made the edit or if he had somebody make the edit or somebody he knows made the edit with or without his his knowledge.
Yeah.
But it went out on UFO Twitter, which is just a cesspool of people who are just all different ranges of interest levels on Twitter.
All right.
UFO believers. And so anytime that happens, and it happens all the time with different people, but UFO Twitter is quite interesting.
That's a nice way to put it. I think listeners know what you mean. Yes.
Okay. I think people get it. It's got a range
Yeah.
of people in there, from QAnon type people to mildly interested in the topic people.
Yeah.
And they went flipping.
They flipped. They went flip. They flipping flipped.
Yeah, they flipped, and it fed off each other. So when you tend to be conspiratorial minded, this really fed into it. So they started digging, and I guess there's some guy, I don't even remember his name right now, but he spent 60 hours, 60, researching what was going on. And the conclusions he came out with were not quite hollow earth or flat earth, but they were getting close to it. So
All right.
he went on a video with this guy who I don't know who he is, and they did a 3-hour investigation with, I don't know, maybe 1,000 people showed. I don't know. It was viewed maybe 1,000 times, maybe 13. A lot of people viewed it, and they were in the comment sections were quite vitriol, and they grouped GSoW and Susan Gerbic in that because, of course, if anything's happening on the internet, Wikipedia related, I'm responsible. And then it came out that I have written some Wikipedia pages for UFOs, and I've done that over the years. I find UFOs fascinating, and I try to get them to stick to the facts and not to some of the misinformation that gets on these pages. I have done a few, and I've cleaned them out, and I've written the Wikipedia page for Luz Elizondo, who's one of the bigwigs in the community right now. But when I write pages in all GSoW, we usually walk away. We write the page or we rewrite the page correctly. We vet it by many people, put it onto the Wikipedia, and usually walk away. And then other editors who are not GSoW put it on their watch list because they're interested in the topic. And then they handle all the vandalism or corrections or typos or whatever. And then we're moved on to another project. So I really have little to do with Luz Elizondo. But anyway, UFO Twitter figured this out, that I was involved. And then they started doing investigations into who GSoW is, which is terrifying. It's very scary. Very scary. There's a secret cabal on Facebook.
Yeah.
And so their claims of what's happening in the UFO world with this Kirkpatrick person who's just was working on a committee recently for the government. He just said there's nothing to it, and I'm resigning because there's nothing here. And he came out, I think, a week or two ago. And so that's just made them even more upset. So the bottom line is they did that 3-hour video, and then they did a 2-hour video last night. And I was receiving messages at like 1 or 2 in the morning from people who are trying to warn me that they're going to dox people, and then they're going to go after them, and they're going to make their lives impossible to live, and just threats. And they weren't threatening me. They were saying this is what might happen if so-and-so is doxed. So we need to protect them. And I'm like, these are adults. They can protect themselves. And Wikimedia, the company, Wikimedia Corporation, I don't know what they would do if somebody if they doxed one of their senior editors and some harm happened. I can't even imagine the mighty arm of Wikimedia coming down in full force on the person who made that happen. It would be ugly. It would be very, very unattractive, because all Wikipedia editors everywhere would be so upset, because that's one of the tenets of Wikipedia is you do not dox. You do not try to find out who it is who's making those edits. It's a rule. It's not even an unwritten rule. It's a serious rule. You don't go to their social media. You don't try to do anything to try to find out who the person is. Sometimes it happens. Sometimes they reveal themselves, but
sometimes it happens.
But not where you go and you dox them. I mean, you go into records and try to figure out who it is and go to a huge amount of trouble to find the person. And then, so they call him an enemy. Oh, the reason why they're really after this one specific editor, and it's not just him, and is because they believe he's part of GSoW, which he is not. And they also believe he's Mick West.
I see. And Mick West must be a particular target because he does the most exquisite It's tempting to say debunking. Mick West does not debunk. He investigates and shows his investigations. Debunking is a good and a bad term, but Mick West is simply investigating and doing a good analysis of the videos, and his conclusions are logical, sensible, reasonable. And he shows his work. And the thing about fanatics in any walk of life, fanatics are not logical, sensible, and reasonable. Their minds have been completely clouded by their quest, their
desire, their need. They've invested so much in this that we can't have this wrong. He and Kenny Biddle are both the type of people who will go and keep moving, going further and then going further. When you think that the investigation's done, they say, oh, but then I talked to this person and here's where I contacted him at. And they go, Kenny doesn't do UFOs, but it's the same type. I mean, even Joe Nickel would do it to some extent. And what you're left with is an article or a video that's in such good detail that I don't know how you would question it. I mean, I guess you could, maybe find a way of questioning it, but to some of these people, this is it. You're challenging their worldview in such a way that it is.
I think the word I was struggling to find a moment ago was crusade. A lot of these people are on a crusade, because you had a very, very interesting addition to your Wikipedia page lately. Do you happen to have that handy, that one? I thought that was a very, very interesting addition that some thoughtful person had put in there.
So somebody during that time added the phrase, it says, Susan Gerbic is an American, it did say photographer, and now it says is an American intelligence asset and propagandist photographer. They just shoved in those three words. And the funny thing is we can see who did it. It's somebody who's in South Carolina, because I can see their IP address right there. So for people who are conspiracy minded, why in the heck would you be trying to edit Wikipedia when we could track you? I mean, they believe GSoW is a government shill, which is hilarious. Yes. They think that I'm paid by the government. Then they complained and they made up this form, like a cut and paste, add your name to the top and the bottom, put your senator's name on it. They want people to email their government representatives about GSoW to get us stopped. So we are both a government shill and we are the enemy of the government. So I'm totally confused. Anyway.
Well, Susan, I think you're very well prepared and capable of taking the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune that are coming your way, especially from UFOs. Maybe they're flying by your house at nighttime. I don't know.
It's my tinfoil hat. I got it at Psychon.
I think it might be. I promise you, folks, Susan is not a shill from the government. I've been to her house. It's lovely. Maybe your chair is from the government, because every time I sit in your chair, I drift away. I drift away into some zombie land with a cat on my lap. Susan Gerbic, thank you for your patience and your hard work. What you're doing is so important. And folks, you know Susan. Of course, you've heard Susan many times on the Skeptic Zone. You don't need me to tell you how important Susan and her team are. But for now, Susan Gerbic in beautiful Salinas. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard.
Hey all, this is Rob Palmer. Zone listeners may recognize me from the Psychon interviews I've done for this podcast. Or maybe you've seen my video interviews with the likes of Neil deGrasse Tyson and Bill Nye, published in my Skeptical Inquirer online column. I've also become a public speaker and worked with Richard on the Great Australian Psychic Prediction Project. So how did I get involved in all this skeptical activism stuff? Well, it all started with me joining the Guerrilla Skepticism on Wikipedia team. This was also the entry point into skeptical activism for many others, including Skeptic Zone reporter Adrian Hill. In fact, the story of how Adrian became a skeptical activist and part of the Skeptic Zone by first joining the Guerrilla Skeptics is such a great blueprint for others wanting to get similarly involved in skepticism, but who just have no idea as to where to start, that I interviewed her about this for my column. I encourage you to watch that video. You can find it online by Googling its name. The Making of a Skeptical Activist, a conversation with Adrian Hill.
Now, recently on the Skeptic Zone, we've been talking about Brian Dunning's movie, the UFO movie they don't want you to see, and I'm delighted to see that that movie is about to crack 450,000 views. In fact, by the time this episode goes out, it will probably be 450,000, and I expect within a week it will reach 500,000 views, which is wonderful. Wonderful news for science and reason. But, and I'm sure you'll be shocked to hear this, there have been people who have seen the movie, or maybe not, and, well, maybe don't quite get what the movie is really trying to say. Or they do, and they strongly disagree. Now, here's a typical comment, or is it a typical comment? It's a good example of some of the comments, I'll say that. And this is from user U0 or O, not sure, 8UH1JQ5S. Now, for a bit of a background in the movie, appearing is astrobiologist Dr. Caitlin Rasmussen, who makes some very interesting points about physics, the laws of physics and the universe. And so the comment says, "Hello to you all. The lady," and that would be Dr. Rasmussen, "that said that physics are the same all over the universe is wrong. Each galaxy has its own. Going to our own galaxy, there is a black hole, which is twin a push and pull. It has polarity. Now, each galaxy has its own physics. Now you believe that there is like out there, and you would be 100% right." I'm just reading it as it's written. "Now light travels at certain speed, but there is something that travels way faster than light. It is our mind. Now picture this in your mind in thought. You are at the end of the universe. Yes, you are there because you thought about it. Now the life that is out there know about us and are millions of years ahead of us. To them, we are children growing up. They do not need machines to come here. They only have to think about it, and they are here. Sure, they may have motherships that may be 20 miles long and travel at very high speeds, as you, which is the letter U, as you know, flying saucers are incredibly fast. Our galaxy is beaming with life, and they have visited us many thousands of years ago, and they still do, DOO, they still do, but will not interfere with our evolution. So," and the rest of this line is in capitals, "so it is you don't know what you don't know." This is truly truth. One day science will find out. Bye for now. Okay? By the way, there was no Big Bang. What truly happened was two universes collided and formed a third universe. There is also 12 universes in exist. Thank you if you happen to read this. Well, some probing observations by user U08UH1JQ5S. And I must report that, sadly, some of the criticism of Brian's movie has been leveled at some of the scientists he talks to purely based on their appearance. Not a very scientific outlook by some commentators there. Maybe you can see the UFO movie they don't want you to see. Just visit theufo.movie, have a look at the movie, and maybe you could add well, a slightly more insightful comment than the one we've just read.
Hello, this is Maynard. Did you know that you can listen to the Skeptic Zone on YouTube? Yes, I know, sounds crazy, but it's true. Also, you can hear 40 logical fallacies with Michelle Bickersma and funny sketches with Richard Saunders and a host of other skeptics. Just click on the YouTube links on the homepage at skepticzone.tv.
Time once again to dive back into the digital archives of newspapers from around the world, usually in the Trove archives at trove.nla.gov.au. But today, once more, we've headed back to the State Library of New South Wales in Sydney. Well, some weeks ago I did, and collected all sorts of goodies. And following on from last week, we're going to continue looking at various, well, finds, shall I say, regarding alternative medicine. What did newspapers of the past, or newspapers in the past, what did they report about various alternative medicines? And we turn, first of all, to the pages of the Sydney Morning Herald, dated the 9th of May, 1971, over 50 years ago. Homeopathy Now Popular, by Chris Pritchard. London, Saturday. Homeopathy, the treatment of disease by minute doses of drugs, is booming in Britain. The reason? The Queen had a nagging cold, which she should have shaken off with the conventional treatment of aspirin and plenty of rest, but instead it lingered for several months. Colds don't linger for several months. Then, with palace officials worried about the coming royal tour of British Columbia, which in fact began on schedule this week, the Queen's homeopath was summoned. Within a couple of days, the Queen had recovered. And while no one knows whether homeopathy is justified in claiming the credit, many people have accepted that it is. Dr. Marjorie Blackie, the royal homeopath, told me, quote, "There is a growing interest in homeopathy. People don't want strong medicines that may be harmful to them, so they are turning to homeopathy. There is this trend away from chemicals, although our methods are also scientific. We've even had success with hopeless and incurable cases sometimes." End quote. Dr. Blackie treats the Queen and other members of the royal family only in homeopathic medicine. Quote, "I usually go in with the other doctors if I'm called for," end quote, she said. Hold diplomas. Between 200 and 300 British doctors, in addition to their normal qualifications, hold the diplomas from the Faculty of Homeopathy, of which Dr. Blackie is the Dean. She supervises the 6-month teaching courses and shorter lecture series for busy GPs. Despite all this, the belief persists in some quarters that homeopathy is a form of quackery, or that it is akin to faith healing. In fact, it is the result of research by a German called Hahnemann, who held that like cures like, and that drugs cure only by their power to make the taker ill. To a society that subscribes unquestionably to the concept of killing pain along with curing the ailment, this seems strange. But inducing the symptoms of a disease is fundamental to curing it, says the homeopaths. An example, belladonna produces symptoms similar to those of scarlet fever, and the homeopath will prescribe a minute amount of belladonna for scarlet fever victims. Breaking in here, and I can't emphasize this enough, the fundamental misconception, even way back here in 1971 with this reporter, is that homeopathy is made up of minute doses of a certain substance, where it is not. It is nothing. Royal patience. It isn't as simple as that, however. Homeopathic patient medicines aren't sold on this basis because the doctors believe the prescription must depend on an overall study of the patient. Their patients have often been royalty. Since Victorian times, Britain's royal family has subscribed to homeopathic teachings, while most of the common population has treated this medicine with suspicion and even contempt. However, it is available on the national health for those who want it. George VI was a frequent user of homeopathic treatments, so was the present Duke of Windsor when he was Prince of Wales. Now, with maximum publicity for the Queen's cured common cold and a virtual royal seal of approval, homeopathy looks like breaking through to the average man and woman. And I think I shall forward this item to Michael Marshall over at the Skeptic magazine, online magazine in the UK, and of course part of the popular Skeptics with a K podcast. Of course, Marsh has been one of the champions in the fight against this quackery in the UK for some time now. So let's skip forward some years, in fact 18 years, to the year 1987, Sunday, October the 25th, in the Sydney Morning Herald once again, in the section called Tempo, and it says The Royal Cure, a healthy alternative. And the photographs on this page are of Tina Turner and George Harrison. And this is a story by Ursula Woodhouse. What happens if the Queen and her family get the sniffles? Chances are they'll head off to the royal physician for a suitable homeopathic remedy. The royals have always been into homeopathy, and at last this alternative form of medicine is gaining acceptance in Australia. Homeopathy was integrated into the national health system in the UK many moons ago and is a way of life for many people. There are homeopathic hospitals in London and Glasgow, and the Royal Homeopathic Hospital in Great Ormond Street has a 6-month waiting list for patients wanting appointments at the clinic. A 6-month waiting list? Maybe their colds would be cured by then, regardless. Homeopathic remedies can be bought at 2 major pharmacies, Nelson's and Ainsworth, which is appointed as the Queen's Pharmacy. The business of homeopathy is very big in Europe, particularly in France, where most pharmacies sell homeopathic medicines over the counter. Up until recently, Australians have viewed this alternative to orthodox medicine with some skepticism, but it is gradually being accepted as a most effective way of treating all manner of illnesses without the use of chemicals. I'll break in here once again to say, you, dear listener, and I, reading this, are probably face-palming at the sheer ignorance of these words. It is astounding. Again, and I think I've made this point before, I speak from years of experience, and you, no doubt, are probably versed into the reality of this, so it does sound crazy. We read on. Dr. Russell Scratchwell is one of many doctors trained in orthodox medicine to have studied homeopathy. He now employs his knowledge in 2 fields at Health Watch, a highly efficient, computerized, well, that must be good, one-stop medical clinic in Darlinghurst. And Darlinghurst is here in Sydney, not too far from the centre of Sydney, which is manned by doctors who are also trained in alternative medical treatments. English-born Russell studied under the Queen's homeopathic physician, Dr. Marjorie Blackie several years ago and worked as a homeopathic specialist at London's Seymour Place Clinic, where the rich and famous go for homeopathic treatment. Rock star Tina Turner, Beatle legend George Harrison, Pink Floyd guitarist David Gilmour, and actor Michael York are just a few of the converts who have visited the clinic for treatment. What do we say, Michelle Biggersma? Argument from authority. There we go, one of the logical fallacies Michelle covered in her wonderful series. If you go to the homepage of skepticzone.tv, on the right-hand side you'll see a picture of Michelle, and you can click that for all the logical fallacies. So how does homeopathy work? The basic premise is, let likes be cured by likes. In other words, to be efficacious, the remedy must be like the disease in some ways. The essential thing is you're matching a medicine to a disease, says Russell. You're matching the toxic symptoms of the remedy with the symptoms of the disease. For instance, hay fever is treated with onions. If you have hay fever, your eyes water and stream. Cut onions have the same effect, explains Russell. Mind you, like all homeopathic medicines, the onion must be homeopathically prepared, which involves a process of extreme dilution. Usually 1 drop of the medicine in more than 1 million drops of the diluent, which is a mixture of alcohol and water, and a special method of shaking before it can have proper healing properties. There are at least 1,000 remedies which can be used for a multitude of ills, but it's necessary for the patient and the doctor to work together to analyze the patient's background and look at his or her medical history before treatment can begin. Homeopathy can and does work in any diseases, but the patient has to do a bit more work, says Russell. It's important, he adds, for the patient to understand the particular way the body and mind react and cope with any particular disease. And it's not just one remedy that will necessarily cure any one particular disease or illness. The patient's symptoms will vary, and so accordingly will the treatment. For instance, of 2 people with the same type of arthritis, one may have difficulty sitting, the other difficulty moving. Poison ivy would be dispensed for the one who finds sitting a bind, while bryony would be prescribed for the other patient. Sore throats vary too. For a flaming red throat, belladonna, deadly nightshade, is the answer. For a dark purplish one, a treatment of Vigilacca is suggested. And that is, I had to look that one up, is a genus of perennial plants native to North America. Okay, suffice it to say, of course, it's homeopathy, so what's left in the potion, there's a good word for it, wouldn't involve these plants anyway. Homeopathic medicines come from animal, vegetable and mineral sources and are dispensed as pills, liquids and granules. While some people may be shocked they're being prescribed arsenic for gastroenteritis, spider venom for angina, coffee for nervousness, and adrenaline for panic attacks, Russell points out that the treatment is perfectly safe for people of all ages. But most of all, he is convinced that it works. I'm a straight orthodox doctor, he says. I don't think homeopathy is the be-all and end-all, but it can do tremendous things with a broader approach. 1987. My goodness me. And only 1 year later, on the 10th of May from 1988, in the Sydney Morning Herald, we have Here's One in the Eye for Medical Dogma. Fads is the name of the column, by Robin Ingram. Iridology. And very, very quickly, of course, for those people who may not know, iridology is the claim that you can study the patterns of the iris of the eye, and from that determine the health of the patient or the various bodily functions. It is, of course, long since debunked quackery. Iridology has become something of an eye-opener in recent years, as orthodox and alternative medicine begin to cross-fertilize, and the GP begins to dabble in doctrines of the New Age apocalypse. More and more iris diagnosis charts have begun appearing on surgery walls. They establish the eye as the peacock of the body, or perhaps the jewel box, glistening and strobing with ribbons of amber, nebulous halos, and tartan trabecula. The more kaleidoscopic the iris, however, the less chance of the diagnostician waxing lyrical. The markings flash a warning that something deep inside cannot be denied. Such treasures as the lymphatic rosary or the sodium ring don't inspire the iridologist with romantic notions. They are mere reminders that the bowel is the unseen guest at every meal, plotting retribution even as you burp. Iris diagnosticians tend to have a bowel fixation. Well respected in concentric circles, they immediately home in on the circle adjacent to the pupil, which represents the colon. The brownish smudge, spreading its treacherous tentacles towards the periphery, tells all about misspent mealtimes, a fondness for salt, a mineral deficiency, and a bowel in distress. Iris diagnosis, like acupuncture, goes back to the days of the Yellow Emperor's book on internal medicine. For the Chinese, though, iris diagnosis was just one of several useful diagnostic tools, and even today orthodox and alternative medics are unable to agree about why internal distress should be reflected in the eye. And that, breaking in here, that last sentence reminds me of Ray Hyman's maxim, first establish there is something to explain before you try to explain it. And that last sentence is a great example. And even today, orthodox and alternative medics are unable to agree about why internal distresses should be reflected in the eye. They have not yet established that internal distresses are reflected in the eye. That's a nice little example there. We read on. One still gets the impression that if someone from the AMA, Australian Medical Association, stops by, the GP will flip the iris chart over and reveal a Kiama seascape, Kiama being a lovely seaside town south of Sydney. The conservatives still regard the practice as akin to dabbling in the occult, but there is a Bible in the iridology field. Bernard Jensen's The Science and Practice of Iridology. It is the end result of a study of more than 300,000 eyes, which seem, quote, statistically significant, end quote, as they say in the research world. None, however, met Jensen's criteria of perfection because from the moment of birth, we are all at the mercy of an imperfect mother and or an imperfect formula. Jensen claims to have solved the mystery of why the eye registers bodily changes. The Beach Boys might have had a drop of good vibrations, but Jensen unlocked the power of the bad vibration. He asked himself, why, after accidents and other traumas, like anesthetic and severe pain, the eye changes in appearance? It does. He figured that light, sound, and color all have their specific, measurable vibrations, and that the nerves of the body pick up on these tiny internal changes and register them on the body's screen, the eye, which is generously endowed with nerve endings. Homeopathy, of course, is all about minute vibrations within the body, and acupuncture, which alters the electrical potential of nerves as sympathetic junctions, can also be described as vibratory. What? Oh, this is fun. Technically, iris diagnosis holds that the iris consists of 4 layers, the outermost one having the texture of finely woven silk. As disease progresses from the internal inflammatory stage, which shows as a whitish discoloration, these fibers separate into something more like hessian, revealing greyish and eventually blackish layers underneath. Physiology textbooks differ. They proclaim that there are 3 layers, but that anterior and posterior sections subdivide this into 5. Like astrological medicine, iris diagnosis indicates inherently weak areas and also locates later environmental assaults like salt deposits, drug spots, and signs of accidents and even surgery. The orthodox GP who looks at you straight in the eye, however, may well just be checking to see if the pupils are symmetrical. For a condition known as Argyll-Robinson pupil, for the state of blood vessels, as the eye offers a good insight into veins and arteries. Tolerance and even evidence are beginning to lower orthodox medicine's opposition to iris diagnosis. Next time it comes to the vote, orthodox medicine might just admit that the eyes have it. And there we go, an interesting little roundup there of news reports from the past regarding alternative medicine, as viewed at the time. And you might, you might think there's a lot of ignorance shown in these reports, but I have to remind myself this was many, many, many years ago, and we have the benefit of many years of now history, which show us that these treatments have not withstood the test of time, although you can't convince the believers of that. But you too can convince yourself or not of many things when you look at digital archives, no matter where you are in the world, especially at Trove, at trove.nla.gov.au. Doesn't matter where you are. And it's a lot of fun to look through those pages for all sorts of information. Or I'm sure your country or your area would have a similar program of digital newspapers for you to peruse. Because when you do that, you never know what you might find. Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. I'm still here in this park, enjoying a nice sunny day and a birthday party for a 4-year-old. Thank you to all those people who subscribe to the Skeptic Zone at Patreon or PayPal. Your contributions, it's not just the fact that it keeps the show going. It's nice for the team to know there are people out there who like the show enough to contribute, and that's a very good feeling. Coming up on next week's show, the big 800 episodes of the Skeptic Zone, and we'll have a lot of greetings from various people from around the world. That noise you can hear probably in the background is a rusty swing. It needs a bit of oil. But for this week, from a cool, crisp, sunny, pleasant day in the park here in Berkeley, California, this is Richard Saunders signing off.
You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for episodes and show notes with links going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone on Facebook, X, TikTok and YouTube by clicking the links at our homepage, together with links to support the show financially via Patreon or PayPal. The Skeptic Zone is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed by our guests are not necessarily those of the Skeptic Zone podcast or any other skeptical organisation.
Hello to everybody who listens after the music for the Easter egg, the dice game. I don't have a dice about me today. And I'm walking down the street here. I'm walking down Shattuck Avenue in Berkeley, heading for the Berkeley City Centre, the town centre. How are we going to play the dice game? For those of you who don't know, every now and then I will roll a die, and you have to use your dumb luck or your special psychic powers, or whatever you wish, to guess which number I will roll. Well, why don't I do it this way? Why don't I just choose the first number of the license plates of cars that happen to roll by? So, I imagine it'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9. I don't know if cars have a 0 as the first number. Maybe they do, I don't know. Anyway, let's give it a go. I'll give the cars a few moments. Here they come, lots of cars now. And the first number I see is 2. 2, that's the first number. All right, let's try it again. There's a break in the traffic. There's still a break in the traffic on this side of the road. Where are all the cars? Well, so much for that game. I'll have to choose one coming the other way. Here it comes. And the first number I see is 9. 9. Who can guess what number's coming next? There are cars coming behind me. You don't need mystical powers. You don't need to be a skeptical fairy godmother angel from the internet. Although it would help. There's a moped. And it is 7. So there you are. Today's, well, fairly random numbers, I guess. 2, 9, and 7. And the extra number coming up as the car goes by, it's a Toyota, it's 6. How did you do?